The thing is, nobody even knew he was supposed to speak that morning. No schedule, no press release, no carefully worded bulletin slipped to a friendly reporter. Just the future king, pale as a sheet, eyes so red you could see them through the screen, gripping the podium like he was holding himself upright. And then he opened his mouth and said something about an irreversible fracture, about a moment from which there would be no going back, and honestly, the wording was so final that even the veteran correspondents didn't know what to do with it. If you just want to keep up with stories like this as they actually make sense, hit subscribe on Crown Watch real quick. It helps, and we'd appreciate it. What's wild is that Prince William didn't name anyone. He didn't have to. The way he spoke about betrayal, about truth being buried under years of protocol and duty, it was obvious he wasn't talking about some abstract institutional problem. He was talking about people inside the family. And the fact that Catherine wasn't mentioned at all, not once in the entire address, that's not an oversight, that's a deliberate omission that tells you she was either the one person he was trying to protect or the one person he couldn't bring himself to talk about yet. The aides had apparently been begging him to reconsider for hours before he walked out there. Senior royals had locked themselves in crisis meetings. But Prince William had already decided. Whatever he found, whatever pushed him to this point, it was bigger than the institution. That's what he kept coming back to. This wasn't about the crown anymore. It was about his truth. The timeline of how Prince William got to this moment is where things start getting really strange. For months, reporters had noticed he seemed off, missing engagements, looking distracted, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. The speculation was all over the place. Some people thought it was personal, marriage trouble, health worries. Others figured it was tension with King Charles, which isn't exactly new. But nobody had the full picture because the full picture was apparently sitting in a locked drawer at his father's private archive. And this is the part that sounds like it should be fiction. Prince William used a master key, one that had been passed from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles during the transition. And while his father was abroad, he accessed the personal archive. What he found were letters between Charles and a foreign head of state, not diplomatic cables, not government business, private correspondence about land and titles and assets tied to personal royal interests, not the British government. Deals that directly undermined what the late Queen had been trying to do, deals that hinted at alliances that threatened the integrity of the monarchy itself. So Prince William confronts the palace legal advisors, demands an explanation, and instead of answers, he gets deflection, rehearsed lines, warnings to think about the implications. Every time he pushed for transparency, he hit another wall. That's when it becomes clear this isn't just about some letters. There's a whole system in place designed to keep this stuff buried. Senior courtiers who've spent years insulating the crown from scandal, not loyal advisors, but gatekeepers protecting secrets too volatile to see daylight. And now Prince William had pierced their veil. The deeper he dug, the more isolated he became inside his own family. Meetings turned tense. Conversations with Charles went cold. What started as a son looking for answers turned into a battle between a father trying to maintain control and an heir who refused to live in denial. Charles begged him to let it go. Prince William refused. The arguments got so loud at one point that palace staff were told to clear the entire floor. And standing in the middle of all of this was Catherine. She's been the stabilizing force in that family for years, everyone knows that, and she tried to pull Prince William back from the edge. If you do this, she told him, you will break everything. The family, the public trust, everything. But the truth had already taken hold of him. He wasn't just doing this as a prince. He was doing this as a father who wanted his children to inherit something they could actually believe in. And honestly, when you look at what happened next, it's clear Catherine was right to be worried because the fallout didn't stop with Prince William's speech. It triggered something much bigger. Right as Prince William's announcement was hitting global headlines, a royal aircraft landed at Heathrow under strict confidentiality. No flight records, no press, just royal security escorting a single passenger. Prince Harry stepped off that plane looking exhausted, eyes tired, holding a sealed envelope with the royal crest that was clearly old, clearly personal, and clearly not something anyone had seen in decades. A letter from Princess Diana, pulled from a hidden vault. But here's the thing. Prince Harry didn't just decide to fly back. He was summoned. Prince William's announcement had triggered a rarely used clause in royal emergency protocol. one that requires every royal bloodline member to report to the UK, including those no longer in active service. Meghan Markle refused to come. Sources close to her say she didn't trust the circumstances and feared the optics of being pulled back into a family that had already consumed so much of her life. So Prince Harry boarded alone, under heavy pressure, carrying a burden nobody could see. When he got to the palace, things got complicated fast. Princess Anne and Prince Edward personally intervened and barred him from entering the private royal quarters. Staff described a tense standoff in the West Corridor, raised voices, accusations, security reportedly stepping between family members. Princess Anne told Prince Harry that this wasn't about his emotions, it was about the survival of the crown. Prince Harry pushed back, waving the letter, demanding to speak to Prince William. But Prince William wasn't there. He had already left for Sandringham, cutting off all direct communication. And this is where the story takes the most devastating turn. Prince William had meant for his message to reach Prince Harry first. An early version of the speech had been hand-delivered to royal messengers with strict instructions to place it in Prince Harry's hands before it hit the press. Something went wrong, whether it was interference or mishandling. Prince Harry never received it. He found out like everyone else through headlines and social media. He felt completely betrayed. It didn't matter what Prince William intended. The damage was done. The two brothers faced each other in a hallway lined with portraits of their ancestors. No cameras, no microphones, just two men bound by blood and divided by wounds too deep for words. Prince Harry asked one question: was I supposed to be blindsided again? Prince William didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was the storm had grown beyond even his control. Their fractured bond had just suffered another violent blow, and the ghost of their mother's last wishes loomed heavier than ever. And while everyone was focused on the brothers, something was happening with Catherine that nobody noticed at first. Behind the palace glass, barely visible, she was trembling. Her health had been slipping for weeks. Unexplained absences, fainting spells, days where she wouldn't come out of her room. But it wasn't just physical. This was emotional exhaustion from carrying the weight of palace secrets, from knowing too much and saying too little, from being too close to Prince William's emotional descent. Every late-night conversation had gotten darker. Every whispered strategy had dissolved into silence. She had carried it all with grace, but even diamonds crack under relentless pressure. The breaking point came from something nobody saw coming. A private journal belonging to Catherine was leaked hours before Prince William's announcement. How it got out is still a mystery, but what it contained was devastating, pages of quiet agony and dread. One line stood out: I wish I had left before this broke us all. That sentence, raw and unfiltered, circled the globe and became the quote that defined the royal family's unraveling. Catherine had never spoken to the press, never given an interview, but her pain now had a voice, and it was louder than any palace statement. Queen Elizabeth had once put strict protection protocols around Catherine, knowing the role she'd eventually have to play. But after the Queen passed, those protocols were quietly dismantled by order of King Charles himself. The late monarch had sensed something about how vulnerable Catherine would become as the royal spotlight intensified. With the Queen gone and Charles asserting control, Catherine was left exposed both emotionally and politically. She had begged Prince William not to speak, not because she didn't believe in him, but because she knew the toll it would take. She had already watched him crumble under discoveries that should never have been his to bear. But Prince William was driven by something bigger than caution, and Catherine stood alone in the lonely corners of the palace where no cameras could reach, silenced not by command but by grief. And then Princess Anne stepped into the room and everything shifted. Nobody speaks like Princess Anne, not in hushed tones, not in riddles, and definitely not in fear. When she entered the private royal chamber moments after Prince William's announcement, the advisors fell silent. Camilla froze. King Charles, for the first time in years, looked uncertain. Princess Anne's voice didn't rise, but it didn't need to. 6 words is all it took. This is not what she wanted. With that single sentence, the veil of denial that had shrouded the royal inner circle was violently torn away. Princess Anne's fury wasn't vague and it wasn't speculative. It was aimed directly at Camilla and the senior aides who had spent years insulating Charles from dissent. She accused them of something more dangerous than policy missteps, the willful distortion of the monarchy's bloodline integrity. According to Princess Anne, there were unpublished final instructions from Queen Elizabeth, personal directives never made public, quietly sealed and kept from even the Privy Council. These weren't ceremonial wishes. These were protective measures, safeguards Elizabeth crafted in her final year, when her health had declined and her trust in the new regime began to fracture. Princess Anne claimed the Queen's private instructions had been deliberately buried because they posed a threat to those now benefiting from their absence. When she cited those documents, Camilla erupted. What followed wasn't a disagreement, it was a detonation. Princess Anne openly questioned the legitimacy of Camilla's place in the line of ceremonial influence, asking aloud whether the Queen ever truly approved of the full title that had since been granted. Camilla, red with rage, stormed out, but not before hurling a remark about being the only one holding the family together. Princess Anne reportedly replied, "Then it's no wonder we've come apart." After the confrontation, Princess Anne requested a private moment with Prince William. In a quiet royal study, she produced an envelope that hadn't seen daylight in over a year. Worn edges, seal untouched, it bore Queen Elizabeth's private crest and had been held under Anne's protection since the Queen's passing. She handed it to Prince William without saying a word. Inside were handwritten pages, emotional reflections, fears, and one chilling sentence that reportedly read, "If the weight becomes unbearable, trust only the blood." What Princess Anne had done wasn't a coup, it was a reckoning. She had drawn a hard line between duty and denial, between tradition and the modern mask that had distorted it. For Prince William, it was a rare moment of clarity in a storm of confusion. But clarity came with a price, because buried within Anne's revelations was a truth even Prince William hadn't been prepared to face. A truth involving someone so young and innocent that nobody had expected they'd become a weapon in this fight for the crown. Prince George is barely tall enough to reach the podium his father spoke from. Yet, in the shadows of Buckingham's walls, he had unknowingly become the centerpiece of a storm threatening to split the monarchy in two. His sudden disappearance from family outings, canceled appearances, forced smiles that barely lasted a moment, it all made sense now. A hidden clause buried deep within Queen Elizabeth's private will had just been revealed. It didn't just outline a hope or a suggestion, it named George as the vessel for a different kind of monarchy, one untouched by the compromise and chaos and quiet corruption that had eroded the crown from within. The clause detailed a secret inheritance and mentorship program established by the Queen in her final year, designed to bypass the expected handlers and place George directly under the guidance of three people: Prince William, Princess Anne, and an unnamed figure outside the traditional royal apparatus. What rattled the palace most was what the Queen's language clearly avoided. Camilla, in all 14 pages of her handwritten supplement, there wasn't a single mention of her name in relation to the next generation. It was intentional, unmistakable, and damning. Camilla, already fuming over Princess Anne's intervention, now found herself frozen out of yet another royal future. Catherine, who had long fought to protect her children from the machinations of the court, refused to hand over George for any engagements outside her supervision. What had been passive tension between the two royal women turned into direct confrontation. Witnesses described an explosive exchange where Camilla accused Catherine of orchestrating a succession trap, a plot to sideline her permanently by hiding behind the Queen's posthumous words. Catherine's response was cold and final. "You were never part of her plan." The reason for George's disappearance from public view now made painful sense. He wasn't ill. He hadn't been sent abroad. He was being shielded. Princess Anne had taken it upon herself to fulfill the Queen's private wishes. In a quiet ceremony held in one of Elizabeth's private chapels, she presented George with a symbolic artifact, a relic passed down through royal bloodlines, said to only be given when the future must be protected at all costs. What that object was remains tightly guarded, but its meaning was clear. George was now more than a boy. He was a symbol of what could still be salvaged. Within hours of the will's details leaking, palace staff loyal to Camilla began circulating counterclaims, questioning the validity of the Queen's final writings, suggesting forgery or manipulation. A legal and emotional war had begun, and at its heart stood a child too young to understand the weight being placed upon his shoulders. And then Prince William made his next move. He stood at the royal gallery not to honor tradition, but to rewrite it. With one calm but cutting phrase, he announced the royal reset order and shattered the very foundations of what Camilla had quietly built. The royal reset was more than symbolic. It was a sweeping directive, signed and sealed, that restructured royal ceremonial hierarchy and formally removed Camilla from any position of influence tied to the next generation of heirs. Her name was not demoted, it was deleted. Erased from rosters, omitted from planning, struck from documents that had once promised her a legacy among the future rulers of Britain. The moment that decree was read aloud in the marble halls of Windsor, gasps spread like wildfire. Camilla's face reportedly turned to stone, but behind her eyes was a storm she could no longer contain. Long-standing staff loyal to Camilla resigned in protest. Some in silence, others slamming doors behind them, but just as many stayed and even more quietly applauded. For years, they had walked on eggshells, navigating a power structure that favored silence over truth. Now the power dynamic had flipped. Princess Anne, Prince Edward, and Catherine stood together, united against Camilla. Their alignment was subtle at first, a shared glance here, a nod there, but behind closed doors, their coordination had been meticulous. King Charles's silence was perhaps the loudest signal of all. He watched the fallout unfold from a private balcony, not a word spoken, not a hand raised in defense. Whether from shock or guilt or tacit approval, nobody could say. But his refusal to intervene left Camilla completely exposed. A queen consort in name only, stripped of allies, and denied a legacy. Whatever power she had once claimed now slipped between her fingers. Camilla was escorted out of the East Palace wing by royal guards, her heels echoing on cold stone, her face streaked with tears. It wasn't exile, not yet, but it was the closest the monarchy had ever come to public repudiation of its own queen. And in the middle of all this chaos, someone pulled a broken, dust-covered tape from a locked royal storage unit that had once belonged to the queen herself. Nobody expected it to function. When the distorted audio hissed into life, the room froze. Princess Diana's voice, soft and deliberate and haunting, pierced through time like a final act of defiance. Never trust a crown that forgets its roots. In that sentence, every illusion Prince William still clung to collapsed. The recording was short but damning. Diana spoke not just as a mother, but as a woman surrounded by betrayal, hinting at forces within the palace who had manipulated her life and distorted her truth. She never named names, but her tone shifted when speaking of those she believed would one day shape her son's futures. One line stood out: "If they ever rewrite your place, know it started with her." For Prince William, there was no doubt who her referred to. He reportedly broke down upon hearing his mother's voice. He locked himself away for hours. The pain wasn't just in the message, it was in its timing. He had made his announcement, torn apart the institution's image, exiled Camilla from the royal future, but this voicemail was the final confirmation that every painful choice had been aligned with his mother's.
Order food you love with Food Panda. Download the app and order now.
Food Panda?
अगर आप हर दिन टॉयलेट साफ नहीं करना चाहते तो बस इसे टॉयलेट टैंक में डाल दीजिए और अगले 6 महीनों तक टॉयलेट खुद ब खुद साफ हो.
Unspoken truth all along. He didn't keep it to himself. In a private moment, Prince William handed the tape to Princess Anne, trusting her to handle it not as a royal, but as his mother's fiercest defender. Later that evening, the recording was played in a quiet sitting room at Windsor. Present were George and Charlotte seated beside Princess Anne, who explained that what they were about to hear was not for the world, but for them, for their blood, for their future. As Diana's voice filled the room, history folded in on itself. A mother long gone had just reclaimed her place in a monarchy she was never allowed to shape. News of the voicemail leaked to the press. The public responded in a way not seen since Diana's funeral. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Vigils appeared overnight at palace gates. Candles burned for a woman the world never stopped mourning. Across generations, people wept not only for what had been lost, but for what had finally been heard. And then King Charles finally stepped forward. After days of deafening quiet, he addressed the nation, not wearing the mantle of a ruler, but carrying the unbearable weight of a father's regret. The nation expected a defense. What they got was a confession. In an unscheduled emergency royal address, his voice shook not from age, but from guilt and weariness, and the realization that the institution he had once vowed to uphold had in the process destroyed what mattered most. His family. I was not strong enough to keep the family whole, he admitted, staring directly into the camera. No palace flags, no regal framing, no ceremonial backdrop, just a man stripped of excuses, exposing the fracture lines between fatherhood and monarchy. He acknowledged his failures, not only as a sovereign, but as a husband who let the past linger too long, and as a father who watched his sons drift further into silence. Then came the moment that stunned the entire realm. King Charles offered to step back indefinitely from royal duties, not just as a symbolic gesture, but as a means of clearing a path for restoration. The monarchy, he admitted, could no longer thrive under the old guard. The world has changed, he said, and the crown must change with it or not at all. Those inside the palace were divided. Some called it a surrender, others called it the most courageous act of his reign. But the people outside listened, and many wept. In what may become his most defining act, King Charles announced he would formally reinstate Queen Elizabeth's unpublished final wishes as official royal protocol. Every suppressed document, every hidden letter, every sealed directive from the late Queen would now guide the institution's next chapter, no longer buried beneath ambition and tradition. Elizabeth's voice would finally return to the throne she left behind. His final words etched themselves into the soul of the nation. Let the future be theirs, not mine. With that sentence, he let go not of the crown entirely, but of the power to control its direction. He turned away from legacy and into humility, into grief, into an acceptance that the era he represented had finally come to an end. The royal stage was reset, and as the cameras faded and silence returned to Buckingham Palace,